Mark Cuban mocks X under Elon Musk as his little echo chamber, defends DEI stance again. Mark Cuban criticized Elon Musk's comments on diversity, equity, and inclusion by saying there are people of various races, ethnicities, orientation, etc., that are regularly excluded from hiring considerations. Cuban engaged in a debate on the social media platform X about DEI, noting that it was important to challenge different viewpoints and promote diverse perspectives and discussions. He referred to X as Elon's little echo chamber. Cuban defended his decision to engage in the debate DEI, explaining that he knew he would face criticism but believed it was essential to reach the audience on X that needed to hear alternative perspectives. If there was one light bulb that came on, that's a win. Beck, Glenn.
He is, I mean, if you don't believe that these people will come after you, they're coming after Donald Trump for what he says and believes. They're coming after all of his supporters. They are coming after the guy who has made a bigger difference on global warming, their claimed number one thing. The guy who's made more difference in that, they're coming after him. Why? Because he thinks that you should be able to speak your mind. Yep. And they immediately try to shut him down. They will do everything to shut him down.
He was a member. They tried the anti-Semitic thing. They tried the girl thing. They're trying the drug thing. And I've said this. I can't. They know how many times I've said this. We owe that guy. He bought it and lost money just for me and you to be able to see and hear everything and make our own decision.
Did you read his book? Did you read the book about him?
I did.
There is no way that guy is going to give up this fight.
Never.
He will die before
here's the question for you.
They picked the wrong guy.
Let me ask the question in a different way. So Mark Cuban says, with that in mind, 94% new jobs in S&P 500 going to the color sounds about what we ought to expect. It's not evidence of employees getting to especially great lengths to hire minorities or discriminating against white workers or doing anything other than fishing where the fish are. If the percentage were much lower than 90%, that we would cause for concern. The question I have for you is the following. He says he believes it's concerning if more than 10% of new jobs in the U.S. go to white people. 60% of the U.S. is white. That's what his concern is. Here's my question for you.
Jeez.
Do you think Mark is doing this because he fears something and he's defending him? Do you think he's doing this because he fully believes this? Do you think he's doing this because he lacks common sense? I don't believe he lacks common sense. Do you think he's doing this because he wants to make certain people happy? Why do you think he's doing this? It's not like he needs money. He's worth $5-6 billion. What's he doing this for?
I don't know him well enough. I've done a couple of interviews with him, and I've been around him a couple of times. So I have very little to go on. But honestly, he might be very smart in a couple of things, but when it comes to politics and everything else, the guy's a moron. He really is.
Mark Cuban.
He has no idea what he is talking about. He calls himself a libertarian. I'll give you a libertarian metal detector. There's nothing in his body that would make that thing beep. There is nothing. I don't know where he thinks he's libertarian, because he's not. And I don't think that he's saying it for any other reason than, it's cool. And yeah, I mean, I think everybody should, be around with free speech. Yeah, well, so do the people on the left who are currently now saying, shut half the country up. They claim to love it too. Mm-hmm. But when push comes to shove, I mean, I stand for people who say the worst things, the things that I find absolutely despicable. I believe they should be able to say that. Mark and his ilk feel the exact opposite. I'm for you as long as you're, reasonable and with me. No, that's not the way it works. I think he's very bright in business. I think he's a genius in what he's done recently, I think, with the Mavericks. But I think he's a moron politically.
The thing with Mark Cuban, just to understand, is he's a very interesting guy because he is where the intersection of corporate legacy media, establishment ideology, NBA, social justice movement, everything that coincides right there. The most interesting thing to me about Mark Cuban is how he's gone from disruptor, the most fined NBA owner, tech guy, like wilding around, getting fined every game. 20 years later, show me more an establishment figure in pop culture when it comes to Shark Tank, CNBC, NBA.
Yeah, but what's the motive though? That's what I'm like. You know, right? He said in a text exchange him and I had for a couple hours last week. He said Twitter's an echo chamber, and I talked about, hey, why don't we do a podcast together if you really want to talk about this stuff? Hey, this sounds like a good audience would win. I would never come because it would be an echo chamber, and if you come over there, you're pandering to your audience. I said, you pick the podcast. Pick the most liberal podcast you feel safe. Let me come. You're richer than me. You're more successful than me. You're wiser than me. You're older than me. What else? I'm like an underdog. I'll come to any turf you want to have the conversation in. Doesn't want to have the conversation, hasn't responded. By the way, again, in every education, Indiana University, exit multiple times, net worth, multi-billionaire, number of employees. Every way you look at it, great. But when it comes down to here, Tom, how do you miss the mark on something like this? Because even on Twitter, when he says Twitter's an echo chamber, what percentage of America is vaccinated? 70%. Yeah. That means what percentage of Twitter is vaccinated? Let's say at least 50%. What echo chamber? You're talking to people that are probably vaccinated and have taken a booster. So it's just some of these guys are sitting there saying, maybe we were wrong when we took this here. Why do you think he's defending this DEI concept, Tom? Logically, nothing makes sense with this DEI concept.
Yeah, I think what has happened, honestly, I think what's happened to Mark Cuban is if you just look at the evolution, and the longer your kid's around the wrong people, the more they behave like those people, And I think what has happened over time, he has been co-opted into their side, on China and sneakers and the NBA. Look at all the controversies that have come and gone. And what does he do? He toes the line. He's been on Shark Tank, owned by a major network for how many seasons? And so how many opportunities do you think there are for things to be said there? But instead, he's co-opted into that. I just think he is slowly like a frog boiled in the pot and has been co-opted into it.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.